You and the rest of your kind take blind comfort in the belief that we are monsters, that you could never do what we did. The key ingredient in the anti-agathic cannot be synthesized. It must be taken from living beings. For one to live forever, another one must die. You will fall upon one another like wolves. It will make what we did pale by comparison. The billions who live forever will be a testimony to my work, and the billions who are murdered to buy that immortality will be the continuance of my work. Not like us, you will become us. That's my monument, Commander. It's a serum which retards the aging process.
Watch Babylon 5, tomorrow at 7, exclusively on TNT.
You have transmissions holding.
Patch incoming signal. Full audio and video decode.
Purple files accessed.
What you are about to see has never been shown to anyone outside the Grey Council.
Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. Welcome to Grey 17, a Babylon 5 podcast, a part of the Front Row Network and NPR Illinois Community Voices. You know, last week I said we were the 28th top TV reviews podcast in Australia. Well, then our friends in New Zealand decided to say, hold our beer, and we are the 4th top TV reviews podcast in New Zealand for the past 30 days. So I don't know what that means, and it probably is like 3 guys in New Zealand going, what the hell is this? But hey, thank you, New Zealand. We appreciate it. My name is Scott, and with me, as always, is...
I'm Justin.
I'm Emily.
Oh, I'm Jessi.
Andrew.
I'm Mike.
Kevin.
John.
Nicole.
And Blake.
And we are here to talk about... Every time I hear this name of this episode, I think we're going to be listening to some heavy metal hardcore, but we are here to talk about Deathwalker. So... let's dive right into this episode of season 1 and do our initial first thoughts. And we will go with Justin first.
All right. I mean, I originally, I'm being a big death metal fan. I very much enjoy the title for this. But what kind of struck me more than anything else was the character of Jadur. I picked up on her pretty quickly as probably the most interesting character I've encountered on B5 so far. The whole thing with, their invasion and with the whole thing with her race being pretty much annihilated and kind of trying to conquer the galaxy totally brought me into kind of thinking of her as the Khan of the B5 universe, and not the Ricardo Montalban Khan. I'm probably thinking more of the Star Trek Into Darkness Khan, with the way, as Scott just chokes on himself there for a second.
There's only one Star Trek film I have ever booed in the theater. That's it.
Star Trek Into Darkness is what happens when you order Star Trek 2 off Wish.com. Just saying.
But move on.
Yes. We can talk for hours about that. But going back to the matter at hand, I really thought that her character was really fascinating. Every time she was on screen, I was fixated on her. And just with her experiments into eugenics and her developing the anti-aging serum or the immortality serum or whatever they ended up calling it, I didn't write it down. I thought she was just a brilliant character. Her whole main work was to try to turn everyone else against her because you can't develop the serum without taking others' lives. And that whole scene where she was talking about, the billions that I will save will be the, culmination of my work. The billions that die will be the continuation of my work. She was just so chilling and just so awesome that I really kind of gravitated towards that character. The B plot, to me, for 99% of the episode, I thought was completely and utterly pointless. And I will go and I will say, Kosh finally freaking shows up for an episode. And I did kind of like that. But the whole negotiations between Kosh and Aboot, who to me looked like Joe Pesci dressed as the Joker, were just, I mean, that I'm like, why am I watching this? What is this about?
Emily.
So I thought it was nice that we actually got to see more with Kosh and get a little more information about him. His little business partner, Aboot, the only thing I could think of was he reminded me of Mel Brooks as Yogurt for reasons I don't fully understand, but that's where my mind kept going. And as far as the main plot, yeah, she was evil, and I kind of hope she ends up in like a burning pit of lava.
As I've mentioned before, JMS tends to write characters based on who he has in his head. Can anyone guess who the vicar was written for?
I'm still going to say Joe Pesci.
Yeah, Joe Pesci or Mel Brooks.
I like the Mel Brooks thing, but Gilbert Godfrey.
I can totally
I can see that. I can see that.
And then Gilbert Godfrey's like, I just did Aladdin, so I don't need you.
I don't need your money. I got Disney money.
I got Iago shit. Let's go. All right, Jessi.
I liked it. I started and it was like, oh, okay, I'm actually excited about this. I am not dreading it. So it was a good time. I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed the character development. The last episode we listened to, I asked for more character development from Talia, and I think we're getting it. I don't see it as completely pointless. I think that, we're going somewhere with that. Jador, who I lovingly referred to as Teen Wolf's mom the whole time. I enjoyed the character. I enjoyed the show overall. For
those of us who grew up on Superman, she was Ursa, and she will always be Ursa in our hearts. Hot. Andrew, you're up.
Probably the only thing I can really say is that after this episode, I'm starting to really like Kosh in the same way that I also like Littlefinger from Game of Thrones. I like characters.
Interesting connection.
Well, Kosh kind of gave me like the same vibe as like you don't know for sure if you can ever trust him. You don't know who he's trying to benefit.
Now I really want to see Kosh open a brothel. That's what I'm looking for. Mike, you're up.
That would be amazing.
I agree. Mike, you're up.
This is a pretty good episode, I thought. I kind of walked into it expecting it to be the villain of the week and kind of being cheesy, but in fact, there's a fair bit of world building that goes on in this episode. I think the acting was actually overall pretty darn good. I think Sarah Douglas plays a really compelling villain in this one. And there's another cool cameo from Robin Curtis, who I think you remember is Lieutenant Savick from Star Trek 3 and 4, who did a nice job as the ambassador. Some good character moments with a lot of different people, with Sinclair, with especially Garibaldi and Lanier. I thought had great moments in this. Lanier giving off that big golden retriever energy in this one. And then a really good moment in the end when he has to deliver some bad news. You could tell that he feels like absolute crap about it, and he does not agree with it. Really good. And I think the whole thing about the villain's premise of immortality versus justice is a really, really cool concept in and of itself. I think the whole idea of a drug that grants immortality is a sci-fi premise that has been explored, but maybe not in enough different medias. I've seen the Miracle Day Torchwood. If anybody's a Doctor Who fan, they've probably seen that, and it was pretty darn interesting. But yeah, I really like this one.
I want me some more Torchwood back, please. Supposedly we may be getting it. Supposedly.
Really?
Kevin. Yeah, well, we can talk about Doctor Who later, but yes. Kevin.
I too really enjoyed seeing both Robin Curtis and Sarah Douglas in this episode, and I definitely really like this episode. It really has some good character development on Sinclair, and some more interesting information on telepaths and the Vorlons. It finally gives you some interesting information about the Dilgar War. And some more ominous information about what's going on with Earth and their thought process on things, but and some interesting dynamics on the council as well. But I agree. I especially really liked Lanier in this episode. I thought he and Garibaldi were the everyman in this episode, even if they weren't able to always do exactly what they wanted to do. You definitely went through the story more thinking along their lines as anybody else.
John.
So shockingly, this is my favorite episode so far after Born to the Purple, and for a different reason. So I like that one because my boy Londo, first of all, was throwing straight fastballs this episode as well, but we can talk about that later. But I actually like some of the stuff that they kind of hit on, which both Mike and Kevin, referenced, which is why it's always great following people as you hear them just talking about your talking points that he wrote down. But the idea about redemption and about, can you outweigh your good with your bad? I thought was very interesting. The whole council thing, again, getting into the politics of, this alliance, this station, and everything that kind of goes into that, which we can dive into more, really started piquing my interest. And I liked, kind of how they played it. You know what I mean? It was much more about politics, about diplomacy. It was a lot of the same stuff that does really interest me. I mean, most of us came together through fake politics in college and our shared love of all that. So I thought this really spoke to me specifically, and I'm not surprised that a lot of us also had the same love for it. So,
and unlike The Gathering, they got the abstention right. So we're moving up in the world. We're doing good. Nicole, what do you got?
I really liked this episode. I thought there was a lot of meat to it, if that makes sense. There was a lot of different characters that were introduced that played a bigger part. We kind of got to see a little bit of everybody, and we got to see more of characters that we already know. So I thought it was really cool how they kind of, showed some new characters, a little bit more of them, a little bit more storyline on some current characters. And I really thought the whole, from start to finish, it was very, interesting. And, it was kind of, I think it's very foreshadowing of what's going to happen, but we can dive into that a little later. But overall, I really enjoyed it. And I thought that Deathwalker was I didn't want to like her, but she was kind of like an evil genius. So I don't particularly like her, but man, she kind of played everybody. So
she played everybody but the Vorlons. They played her.
Exactly.
Blake.
So for me, this episode really shows where JMS is a fan of old school Star Trek, because you see in this episode the type of classic morality plays and ethical issues that classic TOS was known for. And I mean, as John mentioned, or I think it was Mike mentioned, the anti-aging serum, that's a sci-fi trope that's gone around. But when you look through history and you look at medical and scientific advances throughout history, and we've talked about JMS's Nazi connections and his family's connections, and you look at things that came out of research and other stuff out of Nazi Germany or other unethical medical experiments throughout history, this episode takes those very real issues and puts them into the context of this story, very much in the vein of what Roddenberry did in early TOS.
And Blake, I'll take the one thing I want to add to what all you said, which you guys have got most of what I was thinking too, is to take something out of your playbook. This is also where JMS once again points out this is not Star Trek. Yes, he is absolutely taking something from the page of a TOS, but in Star Trek, our heroes would have found a way not to do this. At the end, everyone is somewhat okay with what she's doing. The League of Non-Aligned Worlds are like, well, as long as we can get in the deal, we're fine. The humans, Sinclair, our hero, is saying, well, I can't do anything, so stick her on a boat and send her back to Earth. And finally, the Vorlons are like, well, we'll just do it for you. Mm-hmm. So in Star Trek, it would not have gone that way. And that's what I appreciate about this show, too. Even though I love Star Trek, Babylon 5 is its own thing. Justin, what do you got?
Which then, to me, brings up the struggle. What is the intention of the Vorlon? Because I get a total throughout the episode, and even in previous episodes, I get the vibe that they're planning a war against everyone else, or they're planning a war against humanity. And then this happens, and I'm like, well, maybe they're the guiding, maybe they feel like they have to be a guiding hand. Maybe they're already immortal beings. Maybe they've already experienced the same trials and tribulations that they're trying to help the rest of the populace prevent. So I still really don't know what the Vorlon are about, and I can't wait to find out more.
Mike,
there have been a couple references, and I don't know if I'm just mistaking the wording or not, about how Jador kind of at the end, she's trying to outweigh her bad with her good. And I actually kind of got the takeaway that is not at all true. She's trying to give the universe a big final middle finger by giving them a problem that they're going to have to just struggle and kill each other over.
Yeah, she's trying to prove she was right by making the entire universe do what she did. Yeah,
which is
100%
makes her honestly one of the best sci-fi villains I've ever seen. To what Justin said about the Vorlons, it's like, are they actually themselves immortal? Because he definitely makes it sound that way. That was a thought that kind of occurred to me too. You're not ready for that. Does that mean they are?
Or they went through the same thing and they're trying to prevent it from happening elsewhere.
I absolutely believe that we will be talking Vorlons a lot and Beyond the Rim. Nicole.
So kind of going along with what Justin said, the thing about the Vorlons is we don't really know what his intentions are. There's been a couple little nuggets of him, watching the clips of things on Earth and kind of like studying humans and Earth and all that. And, he refuses to participate in the council and, he's just kind of on his own. So my thoughts were, is he like plotting or scheming or shady, or when he said
shady count?
Well, but like when he was like, you're not ready for that, it's like he was the only person, or I guess alien being, that thought with any sense. Because here's the thing, people on Earth, I mean, even now are greedy and will do anything to not age, and they get Botox and they get nothing wrong with that if you do. But I'm just saying, like, people don't want to age. They're afraid of that. So I can see whether or not it's now or in the future, like the show is set, people don't want to age. People don't want to die. People like want that eternal youth. So something like that, they would be all about. Everyone else was like, all right, cool, let's get this immortality going. And then we can put her on trial, which she knew damn well it wasn't ever going to happen. I don't know. I thought maybe I almost got a sense of like, and I could be completely wrong, maybe a little bit of protectiveness, like, or preventing all of these issues. So I don't know. Again, we don't know anything about him, so it's hard to tell. But that's just kind of what I was thinking about.
John.
I was waiting for her to say it because the Vorlon definitely moved into shady territory this episode for sure.
They did.
From the jump, from both plots, it was just straight shady. But to the end, it's funny that, you guys are talking like, oh, finally they did it. When I saw that, I was like, who the hell do they think they are? They're just coming in here just with that beat talking about, oh, we'll just murder people because we're just extrajudicial and whatever. And I thought, man, this episode, they talked, it was interesting when they were, all the other species were like trying to lay claim, like, no, we're going to try. No, we're going to try. No, we're going to try. And, it made me think of like international, like criminal courts, that we have now. And, they're only about as good as, the people who actually adhere to them. And it was funny that Earth was like, hey, look, yeah, much like in our little situation here, right? They're like, oh, yeah, you should definitely be tried for war crimes. And then they're like, oh, well, we got this American. No. You will not try an American to know war crime. What are you, crazy? And so the Earth Alliance, I got that same kind of energy when, all these different species are like, man, we have such a claim to trying her for the atrocities she committed against us. And Earth was like, well, that's cute, but she can give us something. And so she's beneficial to us. And since we kind of run Babylon 5, we're just going to go ahead and take her. So you guys can just, sit down, remember where you are, and we'll take it from here, which we can get into more in terms of some of the politics stuff. Because I, again, was interested that the league, they have all these people, but it sounded like they had one vote. And I was like, man, the power dynamic, how come they're not, rising up? And when they started to threaten about like, well, we might just take our stuff and go home, I was like, man, I hope they dive more. That's the stuff that really got me interested. So it was when the Vorlons came through and just said, yeah, we're going to do whatever we want to. Good luck. I was like, ooh, that was a big power play, these shady mofos.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the International War Court and everything. I completely agree with you on that. It wasn't just Americans too. I mean, after World War II, Operation Paperclip, we are about to, as we record this, we're going to launch the first mission to the moon with a man capable ship, Artemis 1. Well, Apollo didn't get anywhere without Wernher von Braun, and he helped to make the V2 rocket. Emily.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up what John said about the Vorlon, and Babylon and is a station where they're supposed to be kind of working together, and the Vorlon just make this unilateral decision to assassinate somebody, and they're just like, yeah, we don't like what's happening, so just blow up the ship. And I want to see how that's going to play out in regards to, the relationships between all these different races, because Vorlon have really just kind of been like there but not participating. It seems like Kosh is some sort of informant to his government and not really there to improve relations. It just seems more like an information gathering kind of thing and passing stuff back so they can do whatever in the hell it is they want to do.
Yeah, and this is something I mentioned, I think, in The Gathering, is one of the reasons why this show stands out from Star Trek again, too, is not all the civilizations are on the same level, for the most part. I mean, you can argue, okay, well, there's the Tholians. Well, they don't ever show up. This, we have different hierarchies. John, you mentioned the League of Non-Aligned Worlds only have one vote. Well, they're kind of the new kids on the block. They have maybe 1 or 2 ships from their home planet, and that's it. And actually, the reason why Earth Alliance is not a new kid on the block is because of the Dilgar invasion. They came out and saved everyone's butts, and that's why they moved up. So, and of course, the Vorlons, we don't know everything about them yet, but they obviously are a much more superior race than anyone else. And I like that about this show. It adds to the dynamics. Jessi.
It's like, who the hell does Kosh think he is? Like, this is way above, like, kind of God complex territory. Like, he's making decisions for people that have absolutely nothing to do with him. And it sucked from watching it. It sucked from the non-aligned territories. What do they call them?
League of Non-Aligned Worlds.
Yeah. So none of those people get justice. Not a single one of those people get to try her for her crimes. And it's unfortunate because it goes along with crimes being committed and the person commits suicide. And it's like, there's no justice for anybody. There was just this huge tragedy. And then the person responsible doesn't even have to answer for it. So I felt bad, for the other nations that didn't get their chance.
But I completely agree with you on that, except for I will add, at the end of the day, they were willing to bargain too. True. Even them who at first in that hallway said, you'll have to kill all of us before you take her off this ship. As soon as they realized that they could get a little piece of the pie, they were willing to bargain too.
Well, and people are going to do that. I mean, people are going to do what benefits them, and for them to even make that compromise, it showed class to me, because I thought, at least that's a compromise that works for everyone and not just the Earth.
Surprised more people aren't on the Vorlon side, given that they solved both problems in this episode and only had to fire 2 shots. It is interesting to me that they missed the first time, but whatever.
The gunner was asleep at the wheel, although.
Well, look what he's working with. He's got that little telescoping Waldo that pops out of his cloak. And
was that an answer to the Gathering question about the hand?
Possibly, yeah.
Now he's got the little.
He stopped at Spencer's Gifts on his way up there, and
Mike, what do you got?
Okay. I mean, I'll back that statement up to say that, like, I do kind of agree with the Vorlons in this. Jessi brought up a really interesting point about denying people justice and closure on something, deeply traumatic. But at the same time, as a parent, I just had this vibe of Dad Kosh showing up and being like, that's a stupid idea and you're not doing that. Right. Like I've seen where it goes when my kid blows up the big beach ball and then tries to stand on top of it. That's a trip to the ER, and I'm just not going to ask them if they want to continue with that plan of action or not. I'm going to make them not do it. So that was very much the vibe that I got from that. And yeah, is it a little bit arrogant? Because it's not actually a parental thing, but it is. But at the same time, I think, he took a decisive action that he thought was pretty definitely the right answer. And there are those times. Who's to say?
Nicole, what do you got?
I was going to say, kind of going along what Mike just said, like, I feel like it does suck that they didn't get justice, but the minute they had the opportunity to get in on that immortality, it's like all that want for justice went out the window and the greed came, So I feel like Kosh blowing up her ship, it was more about not necessarily killing her, but stopping anyone from ever getting that serum. And that was almost a bigger problem, I feel like, than anything else. Like, what she did was terrible. And yeah, people should be held accountable for their crimes, 100%. But regardless of what was going to happen, we all know what was going to happen. She was going to go to Earth. They were going to create the serum. Everybody was going to get a piece of the pie. They were going to have the immortality, and she would have never got tried. She would have ran or got out of there, or there would have never been any justice at the end, because people would have got what they wanted, which was the immortality. And then everyone would be tearing each other apart, like she said. So I feel like, I kind of feel like, yeah, like almost like the protective vibe in a way, even though I still think Kosh is shady as hell. I do think that stopping anyone from getting their hands on that serum was a good option, even though it kind of sucks that everybody else didn't get that justice that they deserved. So, and a whole nother thing about Nataf, which I'll get into later when we do predictions. So, she didn't get her, what was they called it? Shokar? I guess that's revenge. Like her revenge, I guess. On her. Yeah. Like I assume that means revenge. Like she didn't get that either. So like, I'm almost wondering how that's going to play out in the long run. So, but that'll be one of my questions for later.
Evan.
Yeah, it struck me as more of a blood oath than anything, but yeah, revenge is a good way to put it. As far as this episode goes, I think this is one of my favorites for the first season for Garibaldi, because this really shows you who he is. He's the guy who he is the everyman, but he's usually right. He is more than willing to tell somebody when they're going down a path, even if they're a friend, even if they're a superior, even if they're both, where he's going to tell them how it is. But at the end of the day, he's going to be a loyal officer and do what he's told. But I don't know if he's going to say, "I told you so" at the end, but probably not. But this is a great Garibaldi episode, and I would love to hear Keneally's rebuttal to that.
It's funny you said about Garibaldi. So I was actually going to say, and everyone hold on to your seats, I did actually enjoy a portion of Lieutenant Commander who should not be named.
Gas!
Dear Diary.
Come on, John, say the name. Come on, you can do it.
Ivanova, was it? I think.
Yeah.
Well, for fuck's sake, John.
I hate you. I hate you with a burning passion of all time. Now I'm going to get hate mail again. Say it right.
So Ivanova and crew, the conversation they had on the bridge was one of my favorite scenes in the show. I actually enjoyed it a lot. As far as character development, I think Mike was saying earlier, this episode provided a lot. That was a pivotal points of it. I enjoyed, everyone's kind of point of view, all the conversation. I just really enjoyed that a lot. That was the type of show that I hope this does more of, again, that character development, showing those personalities, showing where they clash, showing where they come together and letting them kind of, blossom a little bit. So I really enjoyed that a lot. So I got nothing, although to talk about Garibaldi, I guess I was disappointed. This show is the thirstiest show in all of space. And if I had to pick, if there was going to be one dude who was going to try to get some tang, I would have put money with Garibaldi and not the weird open brain robot guy. But, I guess I would have lost that bet.
It's early.
He just wanted to give her a pastrami sandwich. That's all.
And a sunspot.
Hey, listen, it looks like you're doing something wrong. That's all I'm going to say.
And John, I'm not surprised you like this episode, because Londo has one of his best lines in the entire show in this episode. He's not in this episode much. But when they walk into the council and like, oh, nothing was happening, right? Well, we were trying to keep it quiet. Good job.
That made me laugh. That made me snort laugh, that part.
His ratio was just off the chain this episode. It's just, again, there's no way he's not everyone's favorite character. He's incredible. And again, like you said, with 7 seconds of airtime, he crushed it.
Well, and what I loved about the end of the episode when the ship ended up getting destroyed, and he just smiles and he's like, well, all's well that ends well, just being very oh, well, that shit kind of sorted itself. Okay, great.
It's because he didn't have to deal with it. It was very clear the Centauri absolutely wanted a certain thing to happen. And he's just like, well, I guess we don't have to deal with that anymore.
He got his wish.
If the phrase "you got coshed" isn't a thing after this episode, I don't know when it will be.
There's your shirt.
Yep.
That's our new hashtag. You got coshed.
You just got coshed.
All right. So while we're talking about the Vorlon and their assassination, can we also talk about the wind swords harboring this criminal. And who are they, and what exactly were they doing harboring her? I had a lot of questions about that, and some of those will show up in the question section, but there was a group of Minbari harboring this criminal, and the government found out about it and was just kind of like, let's just keep that quiet because it wasn't a good thing to do, and now we don't want people to know. Like, there's something going on there.
I will add to the shadiness of the wind swords a little bit, because this is not spoiler. It actually comes from what JMS just said back in the 90s. Remember the guy who tried to blow up the station with the changeling net in The Gathering and tried to take out Sinclair?
Yep.
And said you have a hole in your mind?
Yep.
He was a windsword. Same clan.
And
So
they are afraid of
definitely
Sinclair, which I found very interesting.
Yes. They know Sinclair well.
Like, all of Minbari seems to be obsessed with this dude. It's crazy.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about like the perceptions of the different like main races in the show, right? The Centauri are the ones who come off as super dodgy, right? They're the used car salesmen of the universe. The Narn are like the rough and tumble, like we'll do whatever to scrap with whoever, right? I've got the impression watching the series that the Minbari tried to cast themselves as these like very holier than thou sorts of characters. Not in the same way that Dad Kosh does, but not to be confused with Dad Kevin.
He's not like, a dad, he's a daddy.
You're right. But like the Minbari kind of cast themselves as these like pure beings who like, yeah, they were in a war, but that they chose not to, and they're very religious, blah, blah, blah. And here we have like another, not the first, but another prime example of them basically admitting that they are flawed and that they do terrible shit just like everybody else does. And they were ashamed to admit of this mistake that they had made, that they had harbored this criminal and potentially used some of her innovations in their war against humanity.
Well, and it's not just the Minbari. I mean, let's talk about Delenn here for a second. Now, of course, behind the scenes, it's because Mira Furlong was only contracted for a certain amount of episodes, and this wasn't one of them. But storyline-wise, she let Lanier do the dirty work for her. So let's keep that in mind.
And then the last point I wanted to make, it was just kind of bringing it back to super serious territory when everybody was talking about how, if you're mad that the Vorlons deprived everybody of justice, yeah, I guess I just would raise a philosophical point about, well, what does justice really look like in this, right? Let's say that you let any one of those non-aligned world races go and try the war criminal. Like, what is the outcome? Everybody gets a dog and pony show that says, yep, she was horrible, and then they have her executed. Well, the Vorlons saved everybody a whole lot of time and effort, didn't they?
I think you would get, much like our courts allow victim impact statements, I think you get to let people kind of tell their story and force her to listen to it.
Right.
And whether at the end of that it's
self-serving.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what justice is.
She's a sociopath. Yeah. She'll get off on it.
Right. I mean, is there really justice for somebody that has killed your family? No. I mean, there is no justice. Your family's still dead, but at least you get it is self-serving. It's I got my 5 seconds to stand up and tell you how terrible you made me feel, even though the person who did that probably doesn't give a shit.
I was saying, and Ivanova hit the nail on the head with that too, didn't she? She said like, oh, tyrants seldom show remorse for the things that they do. And she absolutely didn't.
Right.
I give some kind of shit too, but he actually got some positive stuff from me this episode too. So instead of just jumping into throwing himself, to possibly be killed or, whatever, he used his mind much more and was really, kind of dove into the politics of, getting negotiations and kind of trying to work it out. He got that weird gold comms from a senator, which I didn't realize a senator could just, tell a commander what to do. I don't know what that chain of command's like, but I thought how he handled it was fairly impressive. The only little knot, because I still got to throw my hate in because there's too much love coming out of me right now, was, his seemingly best friend or close friend, Garibaldi's telling him, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do this. No, you can't do this. And he's adamant, like, yes, I am. And then as soon as some random alien's like, don't do it, he's like, you know what? You're right. It's a good point. I won't do it. Thank you for opening up my mind. I thought it was just a pretty quick turn that could have been handled a little bit better. But, you've only got so much time in an episode, so I get it.
Yeah, John, to the senator piece, we actually had that happen in The Gathering too. He was talking to a senator about whatever back then. And what has been told by JMS to the fans about that, and this was, again, 30 years ago he said this, there is a Senate committee that oversees basically the funding of B5, and so they have special access. So much like the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee is going to be able to say more about the budget than other senators, these people are on the B5 committee.
Sure. But I mean, he gave him like an order. He was like, why give it an order?
And I think a part of that, John, is there's within the station, it's kind of a dual role because there's the military function, which falls under, the Earth military. But then there's also this ambassadorial piece, which even in, like with the U.S. government, ambassadors don't answer to the military. They answer to the executive branch, so I think it's that dual role where when it's an issue of something to do under the ambassadorial or diplomatic side, that's when we tend to see the Senate giving more of the orders and directives versus the military side. And JMS never said that, but if you look at a lot of and they blur that a few times, but that tends to be when they do that.
But I don't remember this ever coming up, but I'm also pretty sure Earth Alliance is more of a parliament than a congressional system. We call it a Senate. It's an American show. They call it the Senate, but so really the president and the Senate kind of work more hand in hand than usually you would see in a constitutional democracy, I guess.
But it was also interesting that, it was kind of just casually thrown away. And I guess maybe we should assume all of the ambassadors have it, but the Narn have like a spy in Sinclair's outfit somewhere, right? He said, my source said this. It was like, well, the Narn are just keeping track of Sinclair and everything that's going on.
And they do it quick, too.
You got leaks, man. It's like a sieve.
I mean, we just saw in the last episode that you got security guards who have to pay off gambling debts and do what they need to do. So I am absolutely sure there are people who are in a place where they have to be clandestine. I mean, I'm thinking almost to, without doing too much spoilers for another show, I'm thinking of For All Mankind. There's somebody who falls into being a spy without even realizing that they're a spy just because, death by 1,000 cuts. So it can absolutely happen anywhere.
I just lost my train of thought. The other worlds, so that they're right. So they don't really have, I know you said they're new, but okay, well, how long is that going to last? Right. So there's a bunch of them and they basically get one collective vote and they already thought or, threatened to say all right, well, we'll just pack up and go home then. Clearly Babylon 5, clearly nobody wants that. So, I mean, I guess, maybe this is more of a question, but, I hope they'll dive into that more. And I would imagine that there's definitely a lot of, story there to tell about that dynamic in terms of, the council they have is oddly set up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's going to be like much in season 1. And this is, again, not a spoiler. It's just what you guys have already seen. JMS is setting up a lot of dominoes right now. And as we get farther into the show, he'll start kicking over some of those dominoes. And I think absolutely this world building you're seeing, not only with Earth Alliance, but with how the station is ran and how the council is run will absolutely come into play as we get deeper into the show. Nicole, what do you got?
I just wanted to comment on one thing I noticed too, and I guess maybe it's more of a question, but at the end when Talia goes up to Sinclair to say, hey, I think I have a problem with Kosh, and then told him what happened with that, and him and Garibaldi were kind of having a drink and talking about the day and all that stuff, and they're like, yeah, that'll happen, and oh yeah, that's a recorder, and blah blah blah. So I almost felt like they blew it off a little bit, but I also wonder if maybe that's going to be something that Sinclair would look into, or if that was just kind of them, oh yeah, they do that kind of thing, whatever, but I just felt like they kind of just didn't really, she just kind of walked away looking almost a little defeated. So I almost wonder, I don't know, did they mean to blow her off, or are they going to look into it kind of thing? It was just something that I noticed that I was like, what's up with that? So
yeah, I had that same thought too. And it was they were just both yeah, well, you just got coshed.
Right, exactly.
Everyone's getting coshed today. Emily, what do you got?
Yeah, it's to what Nicole was saying about how they responded to her having this issue with Kosh and them, acting like it wasn't that big of an issue. But if you have this telepath on your station who's supposed to be of assistance and she's essentially been compromised by the situation, they've figured out a way to, I don't know if it's blocking her abilities, but get in her head and make her see and experience things that are really unsettling and traumatizing. And would that then become destabilizing for her? And does that then put the station at risk? Or, if this is happening to her, is there other stuff? Are they doing other stuff in her head that she's not aware of because she's distracted by these like traumatizing scenarios?
John, you had something else?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of piggybacking on what they just said, but you would think that they would be a little more concerned for the telepath on the ship. I mean, that not only is, Vorlon, they've shown to, again, just kind of kill whoever they want, but now, Kosh is just playing with the telepath, playing with Winters and just, we're just going to speak in riddles and have you meet us at the weirdest times I've ever heard of that didn't make any sense. And like, by the way, it's all just mental mind games and we're going to record it all and I'm going to study it and like keep that in my back pocket for later. And, like Nicole said, like Emily said a little bit, is like, these guys just having a beer and just basically like, oh man, bummer. What Mondays, am I right? And I was like, what? Like, she just told you about the serial killer she had. She still has nightmares about his traumatizer. She's opened up to you and said, this is really crazy. And this tapped into that. And that you said, okay, well, whatever. And it's like, maybe you should dive in more, not just for her and her own well-being, but like, hey man, there's a lot of stuff going on with her potentially being weaponized with this species that you know next to nothing about, who just flat out was like, oh, if you guys are going to do this, we're just going to come out of nowhere and shoot this. I mean, there's so much that they felt like they really, really underplayed it. And so again, here you go, Kevin, Garibaldi, again, the head of security, what's he doing? Just shit at his job, man. Shit at his job.
Especially with the crystal, like handing over the crystal. What was that? So she's sitting there while they're having this nonsense conversation. Someone's inside her head messing with it. And they're like, oh, and here's a crystal. Like, what?
We will answer
much?
We will talk about the crystal in Beyond the Rim.
I hate you.
I know you do.
I'm going to quit.
We're all quitting. No more newbies for you, Scott.
I'm just going to start watching that. HBO Max, call my name. I'll be back.
Hey, as much as I hated the end of Game of Thrones, the first episode of House of the Dragon wasn't bad. Has a lot of Matt Smith in it, so it's not bad.
Can we not today? Can
and
we just go one freaking episode without talking about other shows that...
Oh, it's too late.
Yeah,
I've never seen Game of Thrones.
We've talked about Doctor Who, Torchwood, Star Trek, Game of Thrones, For All Mankind. Okay. Anybody else have anything before we go into questions and predictions?
Everybody is shady. It's just a blank statement. I just want to say every new episode, when I think, oh no, okay, these guys might be the good guys. Oh no, okay, these guys might be, they're blah, blah, blah. Like Mike was saying, like the Minbari. Okay, they want to project to this, and then it turns out, nope, they're just as shady as everybody else. The only ones that maybe I'm a little homer for them, but the Centauri, I think they're my favorite race. I think they're probably the best people.
Well, they're also the race that tells you exactly what they're there for. They're the ones that say, we're here to be an empire, and we're kind of in the end of it, and we don't like that, and we're just going to screw up everybody. They're very up in the open about that.
Yeah. Although the Narn, they said, they're making their moves pretty hard.
But again, I mean, I've said it before, but this is why I like this show a lot. Well, there's many reasons, but there is a lot of gray here. No one is a white knight. No one is an evil supervillain. There's a lot of gray. And if you don't like gray, this ain't your show.
It's right in the title.
I think you can answer it. Is this the first time we heard Kosh talk, or did he speak in one of the previous episodes?
No, he's spoken a couple. He's spoken The Gathering. He's spoken, remember in Midnight, the first episode, he said, let them die, both the Narn and the Centauri.
Oh, what a bag of fun that guy is.
He is.
He didn't say those words, did he? Didn't he just say
no?
Yes?
Because Sinclair said, he said, let them die, and Sinclair said the Narn or the Centauri, and Kosh said yes.
That's right.
Which is one of my gifts I use way too much, Kosh saying yes.
It's a good gift.
Yes. Okay, let's go ahead and get in the questions predictions. For those who are just joining us, we are about to jettison the newbies out an airlock so they can't hear about spoilers. But before then, we want to get all their questions from Deathwalker and all their predictions moving forward so we can talk about them just as soon as they can't hear about it. So we'll go with Justin first. Questions and predictions.
I have one question and one prediction. Why specifically did they target Talia? And I feel like they did that for a reason. I feel like she was set up. So with the Joe Pesci Joker and with Kosh, I feel like that she was, again, specifically targeted for some reason in order to provide Kosh with some kind of information. So I want to kind of find out more about that in the future, hopefully. And then just then a prediction. I don't know where it's coming from, and I don't know who it'll be, but I think I've watched enough sci-fi to identify patterns that there's a war coming. And it could be from when Jakar said that they're not done with the Minbari yet. It could be from the actions of the Vorlon. It could be the Earth Alliance with their alien xenophobia that we've seen kind of displayed in some of the past episodes. But I just kind of feel that gathering storm that eventually we're going to see kind of a major war erupt somewhere. And I'm very kind of uneasy, but also at the same time very interested to see how that unfolds.
If you could,
I am searching for a newspaper right now.
What, for me? I didn't do
no,
it.
for me.
You can
No.
translate that look into a T-shirt. We would be
No, Justin calling them the Valoran. They're not a type of drapery material.
No, we went through the whole fucking episode with Justin pronouncing everything right.
Yeah.
And then we get to
the very end.
Until the end. Okay, to all the Facebook people and YouTubers, I'm sorry.
Vorlon.
Vorlon, not the Vorlon.
It's like
Vorlon.
Forever.
Vorlon.
Get off my lawn. Vorlon. Okay.
The fabric, velour. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, John, thank you. Emily, you're up. Question predictions.
Okay, so questions. How going forward, how is everyone going to respond with the Vorlon decision to unilaterally act and just assassinate somebody? The wind swords, how much are they acting outside of government approval if they were harboring a criminal? And has Talia now been compromised? If someone can get in her head and make her like re-experience traumatic interactions with, a psychopath, but what's going to happen to her with that? Does that affect her ability to do whatever her job is on the station?
Ooh, Jessi.
I don't know what's on the crystal. I know we've already talked about that. And I want to know how they did that. Like, how did you get into her head like that? The whole interaction was confusing. The whole process of them talking in gibberish, and that was all. I literally had no idea what was going on. I'm not sure I still do. So
you don't know when the hour of scampering or the hour of lorning is?
I still don't know what that is. I Googled scampering because I was like, what the hell does that mean? Like, what is he talking about? And I didn't get any kind of answers. So I moved on.
You know what? Back in 1994, someone asked JMS, I swear to God, what's the hour of scampering? And his response was, it's tea time.
Nice. Like
tea time.
Well, that's 4 p.m.
Yeah, pretty much. I always take it as like the hour of scampering is when everyone runs around like little mice. So it's like right after work, shift change, I guess. But
tea time is tea time is 4 p.m. Yep.
Well, then what is the hour of longing then?
When everyone wants to get the hell out of work and they can't.
Yeah.
Honestly, I picked it up as midnight.
It's about 1 a.m. It's when you start hitting that "what you doing" text or "you up" text. That's the hour of longing for sure.
That too. I was thinking that too.
Well, you're spending way too much time on OnlyFans. Okay, got it.
Wow.
What? We went from texting to OnlyFans. I can't take you people anywhere. Okay, Andrew.
And we're not going to ask John what comes after the hour of
right.
Yeah.
It's like a fishing, man. You send out all the WYDs and see who responds back. What do you want?
And then John ends up at the hour of do it by himself.
It's usually
or the hour of shame.
Wouldn't that be the hour of scampering as well?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Andrew, questions and predictions.
Yes. I don't really have any predict. What?
I just like the
Yes. And then silence.
It was very much like, yes, I'm ready. I got nothing.
How do I follow this up? Yeah.
Andrew, continue.
My question is, is Talia and Kosh's business like over?
Are you shipping Kosh and Talia now?
No,
He's gonna
their
use the little hand.
collaboration, their professional collaboration.
He said the contract was concluded.
I thought I had a second one, but I don't think I do.
I got you.
You never know.
John. Oh,
he's like Littlefinger.
Little hands. John, questions, predictions.
Yeah, the only question that hasn't been asked, that's a little bit based on what Emily said too, was, what is it about Sinclair that the Minbari are just like obsessed with? I mean, Delenn, secretly married this dude. They got whole militant groups that are in awe and or fear this dude. Like, it seems like if you are a Minbari, you just know about this human Sinclair and have a wide range of emotions. So what is his, whatever to them, and why is it so crazy? So
he made the Triforce glow last week. So
as far as the rest of the show, everybody's shady. It's going to be all out. I can't wait to see what happens. Long live Londo. I'm out.
Nicole, please finish this. Questions, predictions.
So questions, is Na'Toth going to have an issue with Kosh, and is there going to be a conflict with the Narn and the Vorlon after this? Because she didn't get her revenge or blood oath, as Kevin said. So that was one question I had. Also, I think Emily already said it, but are there going to be consequences for Kosh for, doing what he did? And then, I kind of also want to know, like, why are they all in love with Sinclair? And like, what's up with the wind swords? Like, they said that he was afraid of him, so I thought that was kind of interesting. Prediction wise, I feel like I almost wonder, like, I feel like there's going to be more with the Talia thing. I just don't know what, like, maybe is she been compromised, or is she going to be, somebody said something about her being weaponized potentially, for I guess the Vorlon. I don't know. I want to know, like, what is going to happen with her next, because I feel like there's something more to this story with that. So I guess that was I guess that's more of a question than a prediction. And then prediction, I just think some big conflict is coming, and I don't know what it is. There's a lot of balls up in the air right now, and I feel like there's potentially a big conflict coming, and I know I said balls, I'm sorry, but
balls in the air, not just balls.
Balls in the air, juggle them.
But I feel like I feel like there's something coming, and I don't know what it is, but I know something big is coming. And then also I just wanted to point out one thing that we didn't say, which I thought was a great quote. A fatal flaw in a warrior is that they were sentimental. That's what the psycho lady said to Sinclair. And I feel like, is that like foreshadowing that, like, he's going to have a fatal flaw, or, is something going to happen to him? So that was my other question / prediction.
So, Nicole, there's a lot of balls in the air and something is coming. Understood.
Yeah.
Got it.
And John's excited about it.
Yeah.
I will say, though, Nicole, the one thing I can say without going beyond the rim is, and I think maybe it was just not elaborated on enough, Na'Toth didn't have to be the one to kill J'dor.
Okay.
She just wanted J'dor dead. I think she's going to buy Kosh a drink, because
okay, all right,
that was the last of the Dilgar that we know of. So the Dilgar race just got wiped off. So I think Na'Toth's going to have a good drink, and she's going to be happy.
Got it.
We're talking about ethics and everything.
Are we?
We were earlier,
right?
But the Earth Alliance beat the Dilgar and then let them die because of a supernova.
Did they say that too?
Yeah, absolutely they did. They said the Dilgar race was wiped out because after their expansion or their invasion didn't work, they got stuck in their home system and the sun went supernova. The end of the Dilgar.
I knew she said she was the last of her kind, and I knew, whatever, but I didn't realize, or maybe I just didn't hear it, that Earth let them die due to a supernova.
Everyone did. Everyone let them die. Yeah.
I mean, look, if they're basically space Nazis, I don't, who's really jumping to their aid? You know what I mean?
I mean, the whole point of the Dilgar invasion, which we do not hear in this episode and we do not hear in the show, is they knew their son was going supernova, and so they decided to, instead of asking for help, they decided to conquer other worlds to get out of their system. And when they got beat back, they just died. We're going to go ahead and end that segment there, and the newbies are going to leave us so we can talk spoilers and Beyond the Rim. If you are new to Babylon 5, this is where you should leave us. We'll have some credits at the end, and then you can head out the door. If you either are a fan who's already watched the whole series or just don't care about spoilers, stick around, and we'll answer all these questions, predictions that the newbies had. Until next week when we talk about a rough episode, Believers, I'm Scott, and with me is...
I'm Justin.
I'm Emily.
Jessi.
Andrew.
Next.
Mike, this would be you.
God damn it.
Son of a bitch. Sorry. Mike.
Kevin.
I'm John.
Blake.
And I'm Nicole.
And we'll see you next week with Believers. And until next time, join us in Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. All the links are down in the show notes below. Thank you for listening to Grey 17, a Babylon 5 podcast. You can find all the places to listen to this podcast and links to our social media accounts at anchor.fm/Grey17podcast. We want to hear from you, so please join the discussion on Facebook and Twitter. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Grey 17 is a part of the Front Row Network and NPR Illinois Community Voices. You can find all the Front Row shows at thefrontrownetwork.com. Grey 17 is not affiliated with, and this podcast has not been prepared, approved, or licensed by Warner Brothers or any other owners of the Babylon 5 copyright. All audio clips included in this podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders. They are included here for the purpose of review, and no infringement is intended. The opening and closing Babylon 5 themes are available from Falling Matter on YouTube.
And what's out there?
The rim,
And beyond that?
the truth.
Welcome back to Beyond the Rim. Again, just a reminder, if you are new to Babylon 5 and you do not want to be spoiled, now is the time to turn this off, because we are going to spoil everything moving forward with several different big aspects of the show after Deathwalker. So first off, just to kind of get at the crux of the episode, because there were some questions about what happens now with the serum and the Dilgar. Nothing. The Dilgar are gone. Deathwalker is floating in space somewhere dead. And actually, when JMS was asked back in 94, question is, have we seen the last of the Dilgar? Question mark. His response, they're dead as doornails. And he was right. They're dead as doornails. So, but we do have some stuff to talk about with Vorlons and with Talia. So let's jump into the Vorlon conversation. Blake, what do you got?
So with the Vorlons, the whole conversation, I'll touch on the Talia piece in a minute, but I mean, Mike, you got really close with it in the beginning with talking about, Vorlons kind of being the dad complex of stopping the younger races from doing stupid things. But as we're going to find out later in the show, that's kind of the Vorlons, what they're there. That's them in the shadows. They're supposed to be there to watch and guide and help the younger races. Now we see it went wrong because the Vorlons and the shadows have two very different ideas, but the Vorlons have meddled in the younger races throughout their history. And that kind of comes out throughout the show. They manipulated the younger races to develop telepaths as weapons against the shadows. They jumped in. There'll be the scene in season 2 where Kosh comes out of his encounter suit and gets recognized by everybody as some type of religious deity, because that's how the Vorlons built themselves to the younger races. So, this is the first time we've seen it on screen, but within the history, this is exactly what the Vorlons do. They step in whenever they think they need to. And then with the Talia piece, I know, this is a plot point that was not continued. This was going to go a different direction, but it does play in really well into what eventually happened also with Talia, as far as being control and the under the hidden personality and agent underneath who is Talia. So this does play into that really well, even though it wasn't intentional at this point. And it's not inconceivable to think that the Vorlon would be able to detect and know about that and want to ensure against that. Again, not intended, but it plays really well into the eventual plot line.
Well, and actually, not to correct you, but it was intended at this point. JMS did say back in the day that
it was not. Okay.
Yeah, so this is actually tying right to Control. So the idea is Kosh recognizes that there's another personality inside Talia, and what he was doing was making a copy of good Talia, or I guess our Talia, because the original plan, if the actress didn't decide to leave the show, was that was going to be the plot point that after everything was said and done, and actually this is hinted at later on when we talk about criminals having their minds wiped, is they will be able to bring Talia, the real Talia, back. But of course that was never dealt with. And actually when the episode Divided Loyalties, when Talia goes, we do see Garibaldi has a flashback, which is odd because Garibaldi is not in the scene, but Garibaldi has a flashback to the crystal being given to Kosh. So this ties right into Talia in Control.
Forgot about that, yeah.
I think it's really cute. I think it's really cute that some of the newbies thought that there were any consequences or repercussions that could be exacted upon the Vorlons.
Yeah.
They'll find out that that's not really possible later on in the series.
And, I'll give it to some of them because they're not sci-fi fans, but if as a sci-fi fan, if you're just watching this for the first time, it is very clear from the get-go that the Vorlons are way too powerful for you to just care. And kind of we saw that with Sinclair and Garibaldi when we're like, as Mike said, you got Koshed. I mean, what are you going to do? Their ships are alive. What are you going to do?
I was going to say, I wasn't sure where this fit into the conversation, but something that has kind of, bothered me, I guess, since I think it was the Gathering, was the fact that we see how Sinclair interacts with Kosh and how it's this very disassociated, Kosh is physically present, but mentally not very present, actively chooses to avoid engaging with anybody about anything unless he absolutely, has to. But at some point, there's a scene where Sinclair is talking to, I want to say it's like the senator or somebody back on Earth, and they're having a discussion, and the senator just casually drops like, "We've been in contact with the Vorlons," and it's just interesting to me to think that somebody back on Earth has a direct line to the Vorlon, whatever, and I have to, it made me wonder, like, what is that conversation like? Are they more talkative than Kosh is? Is it different than how they interact?
And I think some of that is if we go to the movie In the Beginning.
Yep, that's what I was going to say.
And you go through all of what's going to happen with Babylon Squared and everything else. Kosh knows who Sinclair is because Kosh was there through all of it. So Kosh knows who Sinclair is. I think part of it in the storyline is Kosh is not communicating with Sinclair because they don't want Kosh to give away what Kosh knows. Because we'll see once we get season 2, and the dynamic with Kosh and Sheridan is very much different than what it is with Kosh and Sinclair.
Yeah, even with, we were talking about the Vorlons as a father figure, Kosh literally becomes a father figure to Sheridan. But I completely agree with you, Blake. I think it is, because we saw this, and I just watched In the Beginning because we did, Stars last episode, was the Vorlons are absolutely knowing exactly how the timeline's going to go because Valen told them. So Kosh is going out of his way to make sure things go as they're supposed to. But also, to your point, Mike, about the direct line to the Vorlons, I bet you there's a Vorlon or two at Earthdome, much like there was 2 Vorlons, one being Kosh, on the Minbari ship at the Battle of the Line. They just kind of hang out with the races, quietly guiding them. So I wouldn't doubt if another Kosh, because they're all named Kosh, is hanging out with the Earth president right now.
Yeah, and then I guess the other thing that kind of struck me with what the newbies were talking about was they kind of took issue with the structure of the Babylon 5 Council and how there's the what did they call it? The Oversight Council, was it? Or
Advisory Council? The
Advisory Council versus the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, and how some of them get a vote all by themselves and others have to share a vote, and how that's not very fair. And I guess the thing that kind of that sort of reminded me of the story in Mass Effect, and how there are like key races that are elevated to the kind of like Galactic Council important big dog table, and it's like, well, how do you get invited to the big dog table? Who decides when you deserve to be there or not? And it's like, well, you get your seat at the table when you save everyone else's ass, apparently, is how that happens.
Anybody else have anything for either the Vorlons or Talia? I think the other thing that was hinted at a lot by a couple of the newbies is a war is coming. which actually there's several coming. So I'm glad that they're starting to see that. I mean, obviously you've got a 5-year show to fill, but I think I'm interested to see how they take Chrysalis, which is the last episode of the season, where we actually get the assassination of the president. And I'm wondering to see how they take that. And then, of course, we're going to start getting hints of the shadows here pretty darn soon. Signs and Portents is coming. So I'm looking forward to how they're going to handle that.
And John's in for a hell of a surprise when he sees how the Minbari storyline goes. Or not Minbari,
Yes.
Centauri.
Yeah, Centauri. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, again, Mike, you and I have both said this before. The Babylon 5 is Londo's story. And watching Londo fall, rise, and then fall again is an interesting look at a character for sure. Anybody else have anything they want to add? I mean, I'm sure we'll talk more shadows and Earth fight when we get to it, but at this point, it just kind of hints at what's coming next. Yeah, the only other thing is the newbies were asking about the wind swords, and we will deal with them again. They are one of the main warrior caste clans, and when we get into the Minbari civil strife, they're going to be a very big part of that. I don't know if they're always called out as wind swords, but you can just assume when the warrior caste are doing something shady, thanks, Nicole, it's probably the wind swords.
I really enjoy when Nehruun shows up. I can't wait for that.
Yeah, I love Nehruun. He is one of my favorites. Him and Talon.
In the wilderness.
Yeah, Nehruun and Talon are my two favorite side characters in this show. And Zathras, which we'll get soon.
Mm-hmm.
Zathras, not Zathras. Okay, well, until next week when we get to Believers, which I am very much interested in the conversation that will come of that episode. It actually was produced early on in the season 1. So we just talked about the episode Deathwalker, obviously, which was produced, let me check.
13th.
Yeah, it was 13th produced, but Believers is 5th produced. So we're kind of going back in time with production schedule. And I really think this is JMS planting his flag and saying we are not Star Trek. So I'm interested to see what the newbies feel about with Believers. So until next time, please be sure again to join us in our conversations. We're having some really good ones on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, as well as YouTube. You can find all those links in the show notes below. And then, of course, if you have not done so already, please give us a like or a subscribe or a review in your podcast app of choice. We really do appreciate it. It definitely helps get our show out to other people. So if you're listening to us, and I know many of you have been listening to us from the beginning, please give us a like, give us a review, or whatever your podcast app does so you can help us out. So until next time, I'm Scott, and with me has been
Blake,
Mike,
and Kevin.
And we will see you next time. I don't know how to end the show. Bye.
Deathwalker.